Number breaking free, Isabella's story. The metallic grinding of my inhaler being destroyed in the garbage disposal is a sound that still haunts me. Metal against metal, plastic shattering into fragments, and my mother's cold smile as she watched my lifeline disappear. That moment changed everything. I realized my family didn't just neglect me, they wanted me gone. My name is Isabella, and this is how I learned to breathe again. Number, the perfect facade. Our house on Maple Street looked perfect from the outside. White picket fence, manicured lawn, the picture of suburban success in New Jersey. Inside was a different story. Inside, I was slowly dying. That Saturday morning started like any other weekend. My older sister Jessica was preparing for her audition for the school musical, Wicked. She was the golden child, the star who could do no wrong. I was just Isabella, the inconvenient daughter with asthma who drained family resources without giving anything back. I sat at the breakfast table trying to eat stale cereal while Jessica had fresh oatmeal. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the tightness in my chest, each breath feeling like I was breathing through a straw that kept narrowing. I had felt it coming the night before and used my inhaler then, but I knew I'd need it again. The problem was I only had one left, and my mother kept saying we couldn't afford to refill my prescription yet. Jessica's voice lessons came first. They always came first. The attack hit without warning. One moment I was swallowing cereal, the next I couldn't breathe at all. Not the usual wheezing, this was violent, terrifying. My chest seized completely. I tried to gasp, but nothing came. My hands flew to my throat as my face started changing colors from oxygen deprivation. I knocked my bowl off the table and it shattered on the kitchen floor. That got their attention not from worry, but because I'd made a mess on Jessica's big day. My mother, Evelyn, looked at me with cold contempt. She was tall, elegant, president of the PTA, chair of the neighborhood watch. Image was everything to her. And here I was, her defective daughter, ruining everything again. I reached for my inhaler on the table, vision tunneling, black spots dancing at the edges. My fingers closed around it, and for a moment I felt relief. But before I could bring it to my mouth, my mother snatched it away. What happened next plays in my mind like a horror movie. She walked to the kitchen sink, turned on the garbage disposal, and without a word, dropped my inhaler into it. The grinding noise was deafening. I watched, still unable to breathe, as the blue plastic cracked and splintered, as the metal canister twisted and bent, as my only chance of breathing normally was destroyed in seconds. She turned to me, voice calm and measured like discussing the weather. You always choose the worst moments to draw attention to yourself, Isabella. Today is Jessica's day. This atmosphere is not for you to waste. I was on the floor now, body convulsing as it tried desperately to force air into my lungs. I could feel myself losing consciousness. Through fading vision, I saw my father, Richard, sitting with his Wall Street Journal. He didn't even look up. He just smirked and said, "Let her handle it herself, Evelyn. A little difficulty will teach her some discipline." Then Jessica pulled out her phone. My own sister started filming me. I could hear her giggling as I writhed on the floor, fighting for my life. "Look at this," she said, zooming in. "Looks like a goldfish about to die. This is definitely going to get tons of likes on TikTok." I tried to crawl toward the sink, thinking maybe I could salvage pieces of the inhaler, but my mother blocked my path with her leg. Then my father stood up and grabbed a fistful of my hair. He dragged me across the kitchen floor. I couldn't even scream because I had no air to scream with. He yanked open the back door and threw me outside onto the damp grass. "Go breathe some fresh air out there, you ungrateful brat," he said, and slammed the door. I heard the lock click. They had locked me out. I lay on the wet grass, curled into a fetal position, fighting for every tiny bit of air. Each breath was a battle that could be my last. I focused on staying conscious, on surviving just one more minute, then another. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the attack began to ease, not because I got help, but because my body somehow pushed through it alone. By the time I could breathe normally, almost an hour had passed. I could hear laughter from inside. They were having breakfast, probably discussing Jessica's audition, living their perfect lives while I had nearly died on their lawn. I sat there in my pajamas, soaked from morning dew, shaking from cold and residual effects, and something inside me fundamentally changed. This wasn't just neglect. This was deliberate. They had destroyed my inhaler on purpose. They had watched me suffocate on purpose. They had enjoyed it. Number, escalation. After that morning, things got worse. My mother's cruelty became more calculated, more intentional. Days later at Walmart, I watched her walk past my prescription refill sitting ready at the pharmacy. "The family budget has to prioritize Jessica's voice lessons," she said loudly enough for others to hear. "Maybe if you contributed something instead of draining our resources, we could afford your medications." I felt the stares, the judgment. Here was this ungrateful teenager complaining when her mother was clearly doing her best. That was the image my mother cultivated, the struggling mother doing everything for her difficult children. Never mind my father made 6 figures. Never mind they'd just installed a new pool. Never mind, Jessica's closet was full of designer clothes while I wore hand-me-downs. The physical violence escalated too. One evening, I accidentally knocked over a glass of water that spilled on my father's important blueprints. He exploded. Before I could apologize, his hand connected with my face so hard I fell sideways. My head hit the corner of the table, and I felt sharp pain above my left eyebrow. Blood trickled down my face. "You stupid, clumsy idiot," he shouted. "Do you have any idea how important those designs are?" My mother walked in, saw me bleeding on the floor, and simply handed me a dish towel. "Clean yourself up, and don't get blood on the carpet." The cut left a scar. I started wearing bangs to cover it, not from shame but because I didn't want to explain how the successful architect with the beautiful family had split his daughter's skin open over spilled water. At school, Jessica spread rumors that I faked my asthma for attention, that I was just lazy. She showed that video of my asthma attack to her friends, and they laughed. Soon, everyone had seen it. I became a joke, the girl who couldn't breathe properly, the weakling, the faker. Our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, seemed to notice something was wrong. One day she caught me examining bruises on my forearms from where my father had grabbed me. I watched her face change as she realized they were fresh, as she saw the fear in my eyes. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. I could see the internal debate about whether to get involved. In the end, she chose silence. She gave me a sad smile, pressed a cookie into my hand, and went back to her house. I understood that Mrs. Henderson was afraid, too afraid of confrontation, of being wrong, of the social consequences of accusing a respectable family. But her silence still hurt. Number, the breaking point. The breaking point came on the night of Jessica's big musical performance. The whole family was going to watch her debut as Elphaba in Wicked. They'd been preparing for months, buying expensive tickets, arranging a celebration dinner. It was Jessica's moment to shine. The problem was I woke up that morning feeling terrible. My chest was tight, breathing shallow, and I recognized the signs of a major attack brewing. I had an emergency inhaler I'd bought with saved money, but it was almost empty. I needed to go to the hospital, but I knew what would happen if I said anything. So I stayed quiet. I watched my family get dressed in their finest clothes, watched them fuss over Jessica. No one asked how I was feeling. No one noticed I was breathing rapidly, pressing my hand against my chest, pale and sweating. When it was time to leave, my mother looked at me and said, "You're not coming." I stared at her. "What?" "You heard me. We can't have you causing a scene during Jessica's performance. You'll stay here." They left without another word. I was completely alone. An hour after they left, the real attack hit. Worse than anything before. My airways closed completely. I staggered to the phone, managed to dial 911, but when the operator answered, I couldn't speak. I couldn't force any words out. My legs gave out and I collapsed onto the living room floor. The phone fell from my hand, the operator's voice still asking questions. I tried to reach for it, but my vision was going dark. My last thought before losing consciousness was that this was it, this was how I would die, alone on the floor while my family celebrated. I woke up in a hospital bed with an oxygen mask on my face. The first thing I saw was Mrs. Henderson sitting beside my bed, face lined with worry. When she saw my eyes open, she burst into tears. "Thank God," she whispered. "Thank God you're alive." She explained she'd been worried all day, had seen my family leave without me, and something told her to check on me. She'd looked through our front window and seen me lying on the floor. She called 911 immediately and stayed until the ambulance arrived. The doctor told me in very serious terms how lucky I was to be alive. I had been minutes away from brain damage from oxygen deprivation. If Mrs. Henderson hadn't found me when she did, I would have died. My family arrived an hour later, after Jessica's performance ended. They walked in with annoyed expressions, as if I'd deliberately timed my near-death experience to inconvenience them. "Well, you're alive, so that's good," my mother said in a tone suggesting it wasn't actually that good. "The doctor says you can come home tomorrow." My father didn't say anything. He just stood checking his phone, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Jessica looked at me with pure hatred. "You just couldn't let me have one night, could you? You always have to make everything about you and your breathing problems." After they left, I lay in that hospital bed and made a decision. I was done being the victim. I was done hoping they would love me. Done trying to earn their affection. If they wanted war, I would give them one. But I wouldn't fight with fists or voice. I would fight with my mind. Number, the strategy. Over the next few weeks, I became a different person. On the outside, I was quiet and compliant, even more withdrawn. My family thought I was sulking, and they were relieved I was making myself more invisible. They had no idea I was planning something. I spent every free moment at the school library, using computers to research. I learned about manipulation, social dynamics, reputation destruction. I learned about financial fraud, intellectual property theft, digital trails. I observed my family with new eyes, noting their weaknesses, fears, secrets. My mother's greatest fear was losing her image, her position as the perfect suburban matriarch. She was PTA president, chaired multiple committees, was the woman everyone looked up to. Her appearance was everything. My father's Achilles heel was his career. He'd built a reputation as an innovative architect, but I knew the truth. I'd seen him working late, going through portfolios of young architects' work, stealing ideas and passing them off as his own. He was a fraud, and I had evidence. Jessica's weakness was obvious, her desperate need for fame and validation. She wanted to be a star more than anything. She spent every moment cultivating her social media presence, building her brand as the next big theater talent. Her entire identity was wrapped up in being special, admired, the center of attention. Number the first strike. I started with my mother. I knew she was severely allergic to a particular chemical compound found in cheap hair dye. Years ago, a reaction had landed her in the emergency room with hives and swelling. Since then, she only used expensive, hypoallergenic products from high-end salons. I waited until she'd just bought a new bottle of her favorite hair color treatment. It was a Sunday night ritual, doing her roots to maintain her perfect blonde highlights. It took me 3 weeks to find an exact replica of the bottle. I searched online, went to sketchy beauty supply stores, and finally found what I needed. A knockoff that looked identical but was filled with the cheapest ingredients, including the exact chemical she was allergic to. I made the switch on a Saturday afternoon while she was at a charity luncheon. I carefully poured out her real product and replaced it with the fake, making sure every detail was perfect. The next morning was the PTA meeting, where she was giving a major presentation about the school's fundraising initiative. She wanted to look perfect. She did her hair that Sunday night as usual. I was in my room when I heard her scream. I found her in the bathroom, staring at herself in horror. Her hair was falling out in clumps, actual chunks coming away in her hands. Her scalp was bright red, covered in angry welts and hives. The allergic reaction was severe and immediate. She was hysterical, screaming for my father, crying about her hair, about the meeting tomorrow. My father called her dermatologist, who prescribed emergency medications and told her she'd need to shave her head to stop the reaction from spreading. By morning, my mother was nearly bald, scalp still covered in a rash, with no choice but to wear a cheap wig ordered with overnight shipping. The wig looked awful, obviously fake, and kept slipping. She went to the PTA meeting anyway, too proud to cancel. I heard about it from other students. The wig had slipped during her presentation, revealing her patchy, scabbed scalp. Someone took a photo, and it spread through the school community within hours. The comments were brutal. Within a week, there was a petition calling for her to step down as PTA president. She was humiliated, broken, spending days in her bedroom crying. And the best part? She never suspected me. She blamed the salon, threatened to sue, but never once considered that her own daughter had orchestrated it. Number the second target. Next was my father. This required more patience, more careful planning. Richard had been working on a major project, a sustainable housing development that would make him millions. I knew it was based almost entirely on stolen ideas. I'd seen him go through the portfolio of a young architect named Marcus Chen, whose innovative eco-friendly designs had been submitted to my father's firm as part of a competition. Marcus hadn't won. He'd been told his ideas were too impractical. But I'd watched my father photograph every page with his phone, make notes, sketch modifications to make the designs look different enough to avoid obvious plagiarism. My father was sloppy, though. He kept everything on his computer, using the same password for everything, Jessica's birthday. I'd figured that out years ago. One night, while everyone slept, I used his computer to copy everything. Every stolen design, every original submission, every note about how to modify the work. I also found emails discussing how to steal ideas without getting caught, bragging about his ability to take credit for others' work. I created an anonymous email account using the library computer, routing it through multiple proxies. Then I sent everything to 3 places: Marcus Chen himself, the client who'd hired my father for the sustainable housing project, and my father's biggest competitor. The fallout was spectacular. Marcus immediately filed a lawsuit for intellectual property theft. The client pulled out and demanded their deposit back. The rival firm leaked the story to architecture trade publications, and suddenly my father's entire career was under scrutiny. Within a month, my father was fired. The lawsuit was moving forward, and Marcus's lawyer was confident they'd win significant damages. My father spent his days at home drinking, raging, trying to figure out who'd betrayed him. He suspected colleagues, competitors, everyone except his quiet, invisible daughter. The stress destroyed him. He gained weight, stopped shaving, walked around in his bathrobe like a ghost. The man who'd thrown me onto the lawn during an asthma attack was now broken, defeated, powerless. Number, the masterpiece. Jessica was still left, and she was going to be my masterpiece. After her successful Wicked performance, Jessica had been cast as the lead in the school's spring musical, Les Misérables, playing Eponine. This was huge, a role that would be seen by talent scouts, that could lead to college scholarships, launch her career. She talked about nothing else. But I knew a secret about Jessica. She couldn't actually sing that well. She was decent, but not great. Her success in Wicked had been because she lip-synced to a pre-recorded track during difficult songs, claiming she had a cold. The directors allowed it as a one-time thing. For this performance, Jessica was planning to do it again. I knew because I'd overheard her on the phone bragging about how she'd found a professional recording and planned to modify it to sound like her voice. "They're too stupid to notice," she'd said, laughing. "I'm the star, they won't call me out." I started recording her whenever I could, using a small digital recorder I'd bought with saved money. I caught her on the phone multiple times, each conversation more damning than the last. She talked about fooling the directors, manipulating the sound crew, how everyone believed she was naturally talented when she was just a good actress. The night of the big performance arrived. The auditorium was packed with parents, students, and talent scouts from prestigious performing arts schools. This was Jessica's moment. I'd befriended one of the guys on the sound crew, a quiet kid named David who had a crush on me. I'd been nice to him, talked to him about his interests, made him feel seen. When I asked if he could help me with a project, saying I wanted to make a surprise video for my sister's performance, he was eager to help. On performance night, David gave me access to the sound booth. He showed me how the system worked, how backup tracks were loaded, how everything was controlled. He thought I was there to capture Jessica's big moment perfectly. He had no idea what I was really planning. Jessica's big solo came in the second act, her moment to demonstrate her vocal range and emotional depth. The music started, and she opened her mouth to sing along with the pre-recorded track. But that's not what the audience heard. Instead of musical accompaniment, they heard Jessica's voice from my recordings. Her real voice, the one she used when she thought no one important was listening. "Of course I'm lip-syncing. Do you think I'm actually that good? They're all too stupid to notice." The confusion in the auditorium was immediate. Jessica's face went from confident to horrified as she realized what was happening. She looked around wildly, but the recording continued, playing through the theater's sound system for everyone to hear. The directors are idiots. I've been faking half my performances and no one catches on. As long as you look the part and act confident, people believe anything. Then came more recordings, snippets where Jessica mocked fellow performers, bragged about cheating on vocal tests, laughed about manipulating teachers. Every cruel word, every lie, every moment of arrogance was broadcast to the entire auditorium. Someone tried to cut the sound, but I'd made sure the recording was on a loop that would override attempts to stop it. For 3 minutes, the entire auditorium listened to Jessica destroy her own reputation in her own words. When it finally ended, the silence was deafening. Jessica stood frozen on stage, tears streaming, mascara running in black streaks. Then someone in the audience started to boo. Then another. Then more. Within seconds, half the auditorium was booing, while the other half sat in stunned silence. Jessica ran off stage sobbing. The performance couldn't continue. They brought down the curtain and announced the show wouldn't resume. People filed out in shocked groups, already pulling out phones to spread the news. By morning, videos of the incident would be all over social media. Jessica's dreams of stardom were over before they'd really begun. I slipped out quietly. David never knew I was responsible. The sound system was examined, but they couldn't trace where the recording came from. It was a mystery, a scandal, and the absolute destruction of Jessica's reputation. Number, the revelation. The house was different after that night. The atmosphere of confidence and superiority was gone, replaced by defeat and suspicion. My father was unemployed and facing a lawsuit he couldn't afford. My mother's social standing was destroyed, and she barely left her bedroom. Jessica had become a pariah at school, her social media accounts deleted after being bombarded with hate. And me? I was quiet, obedient Isabella, going about my business, expressing appropriate sympathy when they complained about their misfortunes. They never suspected me. Why would they? I was nobody. Nothing. Just the weak daughter with asthma, who they barely noticed. But they noticed me one evening when they called a family meeting. All 4 of us gathered in the living room, and for the first time in months, they actually looked at me. My father spoke first. "Someone has been sabotaging this family." I kept my expression neutral. "What do you mean?" "Everything that's happened, it's too coincidental." My mother said, voice hoarse. "My hair, your father's career, Jessica's performance. Someone planned this." Jessica was staring at me with narrowed eyes. "It was you." I raised my eyebrows. "Me? How would I even do any of that?" "I don't know how, but I know it was you," Jessica hissed. "You've always been jealous of me." I could have kept denying it. I could have maintained the act. But looking at their faces, seeing the broken pieces of the people who'd tried to kill me, I realized I didn't want to hide anymore. I wanted them to know exactly who had destroyed them. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my inhaler, the one I'd finally been able to afford. I took a slow, deliberate puff, maintaining eye contact with my mother. The action was symbolic, a reminder of what they'd done. "You're right. I said calmly. It was me. The admission hung in the air. My father stood up, face reddening with rage. You destroyed everything, you little monster. I didn't flinch. No, I didn't destroy anything. You destroyed yourselves. What are you talking about? My mother demanded. Dad, you destroyed your own career by stealing other people's work. You're a fraud, and I just made sure people found out. Mom, you destroyed your own reputation by caring more about your appearance than reality. Your vanity made you weak, and Jessica, you destroyed your own dreams by being a liar and a fake. I didn't make any of you do those things. I just exposed the truth. My father moved toward me, and I saw that familiar rage, the same look before he hit me, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I stood up, meeting his gaze steadily. You tried to kill me, I said quietly. You destroyed my inhaler and watched me suffocate. You threw me outside like garbage. You left me alone to die. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? You're insane, Jessica spat. We're your family. I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. It was cold, empty of humor. Family? You filmed me during an asthma attack and posted it online. You spread rumors about me. You tried to humiliate me every chance you got. That's not family. We gave you everything, my mother said uncertainly. A home, food, clothes. You gave me the bare minimum required by law to avoid being arrested for neglect, I corrected. And even that was given grudgingly. You made it clear every single day that I was a burden, an inconvenience, something you wished would disappear. So you decided to destroy us? My father shouted. To ruin our lives? I shook my head. I decided to teach you a lesson. The same lesson you taught me when you threw my inhaler in the garbage disposal. To survive, you have to fight for yourself. And I learned to fight in ways you never imagined. I learned that I don't need your approval or your love. I don't need anything from any of you. Where will you even go? Jessica asked, genuine confusion in her voice. That's not your concern anymore, I said. What they didn't know was that I'd already made arrangements. I'd contacted Child Protective Services weeks ago, providing evidence of the abuse. Photos of bruises, recordings of their cruelty, medical records showing my near-death experience and the pattern of neglect. I'd given them Mrs. Henderson's contact information, and she'd agreed to testify. I'd built an airtight case against my own family. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. My family exchanged confused looks. I walked to the door and opened it, revealing 2 social workers and a police officer. Good evening, the older social worker said, showing identification. I'm Sarah Mitchell from Child Protective Services. We need to speak with Evelyn and Richard Martinez regarding allegations of child abuse and neglect. The color drained from my mother's face. My father looked like he'd been punched. Jessica just stood with her mouth open. This is ridiculous, my father blustered without conviction. Our daughter is clearly disturbed. The police officer stepped forward. Sir, we have substantial evidence including medical records, witness testimony, and recordings. I suggest you cooperate fully. Sarah Mitchell looked at me kindly. Isabella, we need you to come with us. We've arranged temporary foster care while we complete our investigation. I'd already packed a small bag days ago, hidden in my closet. When I came back downstairs, my family was being separated into different rooms for questioning. My mother grabbed my arm as I walked past. How could you do this to us? She whispered, and for the first time I saw something that might have been real emotion. Not love, not regret, but fear. Fear of what would happen to her reputation. Fear of the scandal. Fear of losing the image she'd spent so long building. I gently removed her hand. I did what I had to do to survive, just like you taught me. Mrs. Henderson was standing on her porch as I walked out. She had tears running down her face, and she rushed over to hug me. I'm so sorry, she kept saying. I should have done something sooner. I hugged her back, this woman who'd shown me the only real kindness in that house. You saved my life, I told her. That's more than anyone else did. Number a new beginning. The foster family I was placed with lived in Newark, about 30 minutes from my old neighborhood. The Johnsons were an older couple who'd been fostering children for over 20 years. They were kind but not overbearing, giving me space while making clear I was safe with them. The first night in their home, I slept better than I had in years. No tension, no waiting for the other shoe to drop, no fear, just peace. Over the next weeks, the investigation continued. The evidence I'd provided was damning, but there was more. Once it started, other people came forward. Teachers who'd noticed things. A doctor concerned about the pattern of untreated asthma attacks. Even some of Jessica's former friends who admitted seeing my parents be cruel to me. My father was charged with assault and child endangerment. The incident where he'd hit me hard enough to leave a scar was prosecuted, and he eventually pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to probation and mandatory anger management, prohibited from unsupervised contact with minors. My mother faced charges of child neglect and reckless endangerment for the inhaler incident. The prosecutor argued that destroying a child's life-saving medication during a medical emergency was tantamount to attempted murder. She also pleaded guilty, receiving probation and required parenting classes. Jessica wasn't charged since she was also a minor, but social workers investigated whether she'd been abused too. She insisted she hadn't been, and in truth, she probably hadn't. She'd been the golden child, and that had warped her into someone who believed she deserved special treatment at everyone else's expense. The investigation also uncovered the financial situation. Despite my father's six-figure salary, they were deeply in debt. My mother's shopping habits, Jessica's expensive lessons and clothes, the new pool, the luxury car all financed with credit. They'd been living far beyond their means, and with my father's income gone, the whole house of cards collapsed. They had to sell the house to pay off debts and legal fees. I heard all this secondhand, through Sarah Mitchell, who kept me updated. I had no direct contact with my family. The court had granted me a restraining order against all three of them. At first, I felt guilty. Despite everything, they were still my family, and I'd been raised to believe family was everything. But Mrs. Johnson, my foster mother, helped me understand that guilt was a natural response to setting boundaries. "You didn't do anything wrong," she told me one evening. "You protected yourself. That's not something to feel guilty about." "But I destroyed their lives," I said. "No, honey. They destroyed their own lives with their choices. You just made sure those choices had consequences. There's a difference." Number, healing and growth. I started therapy shortly after being placed with the Johnsons. My therapist, Dr. Lisa Chen, specialized in trauma and abuse. She helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't normal, that families weren't supposed to treat each other that way, that I had the right to be angry and hurt. "You survived," she told me during one session. "And not just survived, but found a way to protect yourself and ensure your own safety. That takes remarkable strength." "Sometimes I wonder if I went too far," I admitted. "If maybe I should have just left when I turned 18 instead of doing what I did." Dr. Chen shook her head. "Isabella, you were a child in an abusive situation. You used the resources you had available to escape. Yes, your methods were unconventional, but you were fighting for your life. Literally, they tried to kill you." Hearing it stated so plainly helped. They had tried to kill me. My mother had destroyed my inhaler knowing I'd need it. They'd locked me outside during a severe attack. They'd left me alone when I was clearly in medical distress. These weren't accidents or poor judgment. These were deliberate choices to endanger my life. School became complicated. The story spread through the community quickly. Some people viewed me as a victim rescued from abuse. Others saw me as a vindictive teenager who destroyed her family for attention. I didn't care much about public opinion anymore. I transferred to a different school in Newark for a fresh start. Nobody there knew my history, knew about my family, knew anything except I was a new student named Isabella. It was liberating to walk through halls where people didn't whisper, where I wasn't defined by my trauma or revenge. I made friends slowly, real friends, not people who tolerated me out of obligation. There was Maya, who shared her love of mystery novels. There was Chris, who helped me catch up in calculus. There was Rachel, who invited me to join the art club. These people liked me for who I was, not what I could do for them. My health improved dramatically once I was out of that toxic environment. The Johnsons made sure I always had my medications, always had access to my inhaler, always had proper medical care. The chronic stress that had exacerbated my asthma was gone, and my attacks became less frequent and severe. Mrs. Johnson took me to a pulmonologist, who specialized in asthma management. He adjusted my medications, taught me breathing techniques, helped me understand my triggers. For the first time, I felt like my asthma was under control rather than controlling me. "You've been living in survival mode for so long," the doctor told me. "Your body was constantly stressed, constantly in fight or flight mode. That makes asthma much worse. Now that you're in a safe environment, your body can start to heal." 6 months after leaving my family's house, I had a court hearing to determine my permanent custody arrangement. My parents had the opportunity to argue for my return, but neither showed up. They'd signed papers agreeing to terminate their parental rights, essentially giving up on me entirely. Part of me, a small part, hurt at that final rejection, but mostly I felt relieved. There would be no more court dates, no more possibility of being forced to see them, no more legal ties binding me to people who'd hurt me so deeply. The Johnsons asked if I wanted them to adopt me. They were careful to explain I didn't have to decide right away, that I could stay as a foster child until I aged out if I preferred. But they wanted me to know that if I wanted a permanent family, they'd be honored to have me as their daughter. I cried when they asked. These people who'd known me only 6 months, who had no obligation beyond providing temporary care, wanted to make me a permanent part of their family. They saw value in me, saw me as someone worth keeping, worth loving. "Yes," I told them through tears. "Yes, I want that." The adoption was finalized on a Thursday afternoon in family court. It was simple, just me, the Johnsons, their lawyer, and the judge. When the judge declared I was legally Isabella Marie Johnson, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't Isabella Martinez anymore, wasn't tied to that family, that history, that pain. I was someone new, someone who'd been chosen, someone who belonged. Number moving forward. School continued. I threw myself into studies, determined to build a future that had nothing to do with my past. I joined the debate team and discovered I was good at constructing arguments and thinking on my feet. I started volunteering at a local community center, helping other kids with homework, particularly kids who seemed to be struggling at home. College applications came, and I applied to schools all over the country. I wanted to go far away, put physical distance between myself and New Jersey, between myself and the memories. I got into several good schools, but the one that felt right was a small liberal arts college in Oregon, about as far from my old life as I could get. The Johnsons were supportive, even though I could see it hurt them a little that I wanted to go so far. "You need to spread your wings, mister," Johnson said, hugging me tight. "We'll miss you, but we're so proud of you." During the summer before college, I did something I'd been avoiding. I went back to my old neighborhood, back to Maple Street, to see what had become of the house I grew up in. A new family lived there now, a young couple with a toddler. The yard was full of toys, and I could hear laughter coming from inside. Mrs. Henderson was still next door, and she invited me in for tea. We sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd given me cookies years ago, and talked about everything that had happened. "I'm sorry I didn't do more sooner," she said again, guilt still weighing on her. "You did what you could when you could," I told her. "You saved my life that night. That matters more than anything else." She asked about my plans, about college, about my new family. I told her about the Johnsons, about my friends, about the life I was building. She smiled, eyes watering. "You've become such a strong young woman," she said. "Despite everything they did to you, you survived, you thrived. That's remarkable." "I learned something from all of it," I said. "I learned that survival sometimes requires fighting back, that you can't wait for someone to save you, you have to save yourself." "What happened to them?" she asked quietly. "Your family, I mean." I'd kept loose tabs through occasional internet searches, though I had no direct contact. Dad moved to Pennsylvania, working for a small firm doing residential designs. Nothing like what he had before. Mom got a job at a department store doing makeup consultations. The irony isn't lost on me. And Jessica dropped out of performing arts programs entirely. Last I heard, she was working at a coffee shop and taking online classes. "Do you ever think about reaching out to them?" I considered the question carefully. No. They made their choices, and I made mine. We're all living with the consequences. Maybe someday, years from now, there could be some kind of reconciliation. But right now, I need to focus on my own healing, my own life. I can't do that if I'm still connected to them. She nodded, understanding. "You're wise beyond your years, Isabella." Before I left, she gave me one more hug and pressed something into my hand. It was a small bracelet, simple silver with a charm shaped like a bird in flight. "For freedom," she explained. "You've earned it. Number Oregon and beyond." I left New Jersey in August with everything I owned packed into 2 suitcases and a backpack. The Johnsons drove me to the airport, both crying as they hugged me goodbye. "Call us when you land," Mrs. Johnson said. "And remember, you always have a home with us. Always." Oregon was beautiful, green and misty, and nothing like the suburban sprawl I'd grown up in. My dorm room was small but mine, a space that belonged only to me, where I could breathe freely. I decorated it with photos of the Johnsons, of my friends from Newark, of Mrs. Henderson. I put up inspiring quotes and artwork. I created a space that reflected who I was becoming, not who I'd been forced to be. College was challenging, but in good ways. I struggled with some classes and excelled in others. I made friends with my roommate, a girl from California named Sophie who played guitar and made me laugh. I joined clubs and attended campus events, and slowly built a life that was entirely my own creation. I declared a major in psychology with a minor in social work. I wanted to help other kids going through what I'd gone through, wanted to be the person I'd needed when I was younger. Dr. Chen, my therapist, had inspired me to think about making a career of helping trauma survivors. In my sophomore year, I started volunteering at a crisis hotline for teenagers. I worked shifts late at night, talking to kids struggling with abuse, neglect, feeling invisible and worthless. I knew exactly what they were going through, and I could offer them something precious: hope. "It gets better." I would tell them, "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but it does. You are stronger than you know, and you deserve so much more than what you're getting. Don't give up." Some calls were harder than others. There was a girl named Emma who reminded me so much of myself, trapped in a family that saw her as a burden. I talked her through calling CPS herself, helped her understand that asking for help wasn't betraying her family but protecting herself. When she called back weeks later to tell me she was in a safe foster home, I cried tears of relief and joy. There was a boy named Michael whose father was physically abusive. He was terrified to report it, terrified of what would happen. I shared my story with him. Not all the details, but enough to let him know I understood. Protecting yourself isn't wrong, I told him. You're not responsible for fixing your father. You're only responsible for keeping yourself safe. These conversations reminded me why I'd survived, why I'd fought so hard. It wasn't just for me. It was so that someday I could help others find their way out of the darkness. My asthma continued to improve. I still carried an inhaler everywhere, still had to be careful about triggers, but attacks were rare now. My pulmonologist in Oregon was impressed with how well I was managing my condition. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, he said. You're one of my healthiest asthma patients. What I was doing was living without constant stress and fear. I was sleeping well, eating well, exercising regularly. I was surrounded by people who cared about me and supported me. I was pursuing goals that mattered to me. I was, for the first time in my life, truly happy. Number, unexpected contact. In my junior year, I got a letter. It was forwarded through the Johnsons, and when I saw the return address had no name but a postmark from Pennsylvania, I knew who it was from. I stared at that envelope for days before opening it. Part of me wanted to throw it away without reading it, wanted to maintain the boundary I'd established, but curiosity won out, and eventually I opened it. It was from my father. The letter was short, written in his familiar handwriting that I remembered from homework help when I was very young, back before everything went wrong. Asterisk Isabella, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I was a terrible father. I was cruel and abusive, and I failed you in every possible way. You were right about everything you said that night. I destroyed my own life with my choices, and I destroyed your childhood in the process. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I became the person I was, trying to become someone better. It's probably too late, and I understand if you never want to hear from me again. But I needed to tell you that I'm sorry, and that I'm proud of the person you've become despite what I did to you. I hope you're happy. You deserve happiness. I'm sorry I couldn't give you that when you needed it. Your father, Richard. Asterisk. I read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation, for excuses, for any sign this was another attempt to hurt me. But it seemed genuine. He wasn't asking for anything, wasn't demanding a relationship, wasn't making excuses. He was just apologizing. I talked about it in therapy. My college had excellent mental health services, and I'd continued seeing someone regularly to process my past. My therapist, Dr. Anderson, helped me understand that I didn't owe my father forgiveness, that I could acknowledge his apology without accepting him back into my life. How do you feel about the letter? She asked. Sad, I admitted. Sad that it took losing everything for him to realize what he'd done. Sad that we'll never have the father-daughter relationship we could have had. But also, kind of relieved. Like maybe he's finally taking responsibility for his actions. Do you want to respond? I thought about it for a long time. Maybe someday, but not now. I'm not ready, and I don't know if I'll ever be ready. Right now, I need to keep focusing on my own life, my own healing. Dr. Anderson nodded. That's a very healthy boundary to set. You get to decide what kind of contact, if any, you have with him. There's no right or wrong answer, only what feels right for you. I kept the letter but didn't respond. Maybe years from now I'd feel differently, would be in a place where I could have some kind of limited relationship with my biological father. But that day hadn't come yet, and I wasn't going to force it. Number building a life. Senior year flew by. I applied to graduate programs in clinical psychology, determined to continue my education and eventually become a licensed therapist. I got into several programs, including one at a prestigious university in Seattle that offered me a full scholarship. At my college graduation, the Johnsons were there in the front row, cheering louder than anyone when my name was called. They'd flown across the country to watch me walk across that stage, to celebrate this achievement with me. Mrs. Henderson had sent a card with a generous check and a note saying how proud she was. As I stood there in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, I thought about how far I'd come. 4 years ago, I'd been a terrified teenager who'd nearly died on her living room floor, who'd been so desperate that she'd orchestrated the destruction of her own family. Now, I was a college graduate with a promising future, with people who loved me, with purpose and direction in life. The girl who couldn't breathe had learned not just to breathe, but to thrive. Graduate school in Seattle was intense but rewarding. I dove deep into studying trauma, attachment theory, family systems, and therapeutic interventions. I did my clinical practicum at a center that specialized in working with abused and neglected children. Every day, I saw kids who reminded me of myself, kids who were surviving impossible situations, kids who needed someone to believe them and fight for them. I became known among my supervisors as someone who could connect with the difficult cases, the kids who didn't trust adults, who'd been let down too many times. I understood them because I had been them. I knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be hurt by the people who were supposed to protect you, to feel like you were drowning and no one cared. One of my clients was a 13-year-old girl named Lily who'd been placed in foster care after years of emotional abuse from her mother. She was angry, defensive, unwilling to talk about her feelings. In our first session, she sat with her arms crossed, glaring at me. "I know you don't want to be here," I told her. "And I know you probably don't trust me. That's okay. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but I want you to know that I understand what you're going through, probably more than you think." She looked at me skeptically. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right. I don't know your specific story. But I know what it's like to have a parent who hurts you. I know what it's like to feel like you're not good enough, like you're a burden, like you'd be better off not existing. I know because I lived it too." Something shifted in her expression. "Really?" I nodded. "Really. And I'm not going to lie to you and say everything will be perfect now. It won't be. Healing is hard, and it takes time. But it is possible. You can survive this. You can build a good life for yourself." I did, and you can too. Over the months I worked with Lily, I watched her slowly open up, slowly start to trust again, slowly begin to believe that she deserved better than what she'd gotten. When her foster family decided to adopt her, she cried in my office, but they were tears of relief and hope. "I didn't think anyone would want me," she admitted. "I know that feeling," I told her, and I shared about the Johnsons, about how they'd chosen me when they didn't have to. Someone wanting you doesn't mean you're fixed or perfect. It means they see your worth even when you can't see it yourself. Your foster parents see that in you. Watching Lily heal reminded me of my own journey. I realized that my trauma, as horrible as it had been, had given me something valuable, the ability to help others going through similar experiences. I could take the worst thing that had ever happened to me and transform it into something meaningful. Number full circle. I finished my master's degree and got licensed as a therapist. I was 25 years old, young for the field, but my personal experience combined with my training made me effective. I opened a small private practice specializing in trauma and family conflict, and I also continued to work part-time at the Children's Center. The Johnsons came to visit me in Seattle regularly. They'd become my real parents in every way that mattered. We celebrated holidays together, talked on the phone weekly, supported each other through life's ups and downs. Mrs. Johnson loved to brag about me to anyone who would listen, telling people about her daughter, the therapist who was making a difference in children's lives. At 40, I opened a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping children escape abusive households. We provided legal assistance, therapy, temporary housing, and advocacy. We helped kids navigate the Child Protective Services system, supported them through court proceedings, and connected them with resources. The organization was called Breath of Freedom, inspired by my own story. Our logo was a bird breaking free from a cage, spreading its wings wide. We helped hundreds of children in our first year alone, and the work was both heartbreaking and incredibly rewarding. One of our first clients was a teenage boy named Marcus, who reminded me so much of myself. He was 15, asthmatic like me, being neglected by parents who saw him as an inconvenience. His mother had thrown away his medications multiple times, claiming they couldn't afford them, while his father drove a luxury car. I sat with Marcus in our sunny office and told him my story. Not all of it, but enough. I told him about the inhaler being destroyed, about nearly dying, about finding a way out. His eyes filled with tears as he listened, and when I finished, he whispered, "You understand." "I do," I said, "and I'm going to help you get somewhere safe. You don't have to live like this." We helped Marcus file for emancipation, connected him with a supportive foster family, made sure he had all his medications, and got him into therapy. 2 years later, he graduated high school with honors and got a full scholarship to college. He wanted to be a doctor, he told me, so he could help other kids with chronic illnesses. These were the moments that made everything worthwhile. These were the reasons I'd survived, fought, clawed my way out of that toxic house in New Jersey, so that I could be for others what I wished someone had been for me. Looking back now, I can see the full arc of my journey. From that terrified girl gasping for air on her family's lawn, to the young woman who fought back in the only way she knew how, to the therapist and advocate I've become. The path was painful, sometimes brutal, and not always ethical, but it was mine. I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret exposing the truth about my family, even though the methods were extreme. What I do sometimes wrestle with is whether there could have been another way, a less destructive path to freedom. But I was a child in an impossible situation, and I used the tools available to me. The most important thing is that I broke the cycle. I transformed my pain into purpose. And I made sure that other children wouldn't have to fight alone the way I did. Today, when I take a breath, I'm grateful for it. Every breath is a victory, a reminder that I survived, that I'm still here, that I won. And every child I help, every family I save from the kind of destruction mine caused, is another breath of freedom for them and for me. The girl who couldn't breathe learned to fly.